Hi everybody, welcome to your Rude Rebel Radio.
We should make a jingle for that. Rude Rebel Radio.
It's Rude Rebels. We're still getting used to it.
Yes, yeah, that we're rebels and not awakeningers. I don't know.
Welcome back everybody. Hope you had a beautiful week and you liked the new format. Did you check if that's time-lapse?
Yeah, this time I did my homework. Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. I kind of like it. It was sort of bizarre.
It was very bizarre. Next one we can do in slow motion.
So, what is the topic this week?
This week we thought let's talk about the rebels.
I can almost hear your brain.
To awakening.
The Rude Rebels Guide to Awakening. We were chatting earlier, and it is kind of a thing for newcomers on this journey that basically have their awakening or on the teetering on the edge of having their first awakening. And then when you have it, or when you have that epiphany moment of, oh my God, there's more, I'm going to investigate this. A lot of people are lost. And I remember myself when I had that moment, I think it was 21, and I was outside, and I suddenly had the realization that everything was a reflection of me. So everything that I saw around me was literally me, or at least perceived through the lens of me. And it was so overwhelming, I almost passed out. Like I really had to sit on the park bench and go like, what the fuck just happened? And then I started really searching for it, but...
Did you smoke something before?
No, I quit that actually. Yeah, that could have been a great reason, right? I was high like a kite, but... No, I actually quit that years before, so I was doing a lot of sports at the moment. It was completely clean, so... but I remember being very lost, and going to a lot of spiritual courses and systems from like regression therapy or NLP, and very confused, because sort of finding out that every group that I visited was really nice, because it gave me a sense of belonging, and it gave me a sense of camaraderie. Hey, there's other people on this path. But ultimately, I sensed there was a very defined limit within those groups and those systems. And not to say that any of those things are bad, but I outgrew them one by one. And then I was faced with the next problem. Like, fuck, what do I do now? Like, which group can help me further? And of course, ultimately the answer was no group. Ultimately, you help yourself further.
But do you think you went into that scene because it was a path that was lived by your dad and by your brother and everything? Everybody around you was already kind of exploring these modalities. Do you think that was a heavy reason why you... Definitely.
My father was actually part of the Bhagwan movement, so that was not really a system I would want to go into. So I avoided that like the plague, but they went into something called Avatar, which is basically it's kind of similar to Landmark. It's sort of a self-development course with business aspects to it. And of course, my dad and my brother were both trainers there. So of course, they would drag me to all those courses.
Yeah.
So I was in a lucky position to be close to it. But that system also, after a couple of years, really fell apart as being quite hierarchical and quite limited in its view of this journey. So there were a couple of times where I really went back to confusion. It's like, okay, I know it's me that has to do it, and nobody really speaks the language that I'm looking for.
But I think it's also, looking at how those, or when those systems show up in the world, it's usually like a phase that the world is going through, right?
Yeah.
Like you say, the whole mindset coaching, pyramid scheme things that just came up.
Now buy the silver course for 10,000 euros, and then next is the platinum course. Yeah,
I think that was that had a very distinct moment in time. There was a certain era where you could say that happened there, just like the hippie movement.
Yeah.
in the 60s and 70s. So I think there's always some form of it's almost like people need exactly that in that moment in order to explain to themselves why they now need to work on themselves.
Right.
When
Yeah.
I think the initial nudge that you have to feel I'm different or I never fit in, and we've talked about that in season 1. Go back and listen. I think that definitely the people then get lost in the house rather than saying, okay, this is normal. So no matter how long the whole self-development dates back, there'll always be this, I came to that path because I went to this course. No, I think it happens way before that. When you ask yourself, like, there's more, I don't fit in.
Yeah, I believe that too. And I think every modality that you use until you're done with it is a good stepping stone. Like it wasn't really for me, but I remember a lot of people that I spoke to that their first real step was doing meditation or some sort of Indian type, like or Asian type self-development, whether it's Buddhism or Zen or just meditation in general. And they didn't get stuck in that either, but sort of after a while they all talk about, the meditation really helped me quiet my mind, or really helped me, give me a tool to get all those nasty thoughts that are constantly running around a little bit more quiet. But ultimately it wasn't the end solution. It was just a tool that they gathered and then they
And I think that's the sign of these times now, that now it's become far more common and far more normal that you do yoga or you go to a mindfulness class or you do meditation, or you have a therapist. So I think that the stepping stones are just that, they're stepping stones. And whereas for our generation it was really this huge label that you were carrying, and then there was this whole esoteric thing, and that's also why a lot of people nowadays are so triggered when you say words like love and light, or
I think we grew up in a very old school or very kind of like archaic way of spirituality where you're right, it wasn't accepted. I was always the odd one out of my friend group. Oh, you go to that stuff, and
being a guy is a very seldom thing for a young guy to start on this journey.
I was usually the only guy, for 10 years in all courses.
Oh, that's how you picked all of them girls up.
I wish that worked. No, it was interesting. So how was that for you, though? The first, when you first had your awakening moment, and what is the first modality that you mobilized for yourself?
I wasn't raised in that context like you were. My father was a normal Christian that just went to the Protestant church every Sunday. Me and my sister weren't really expected to follow the same path, but we were raised in that belief, which of course I think is normal, right? Like you teach your children what works for you, and I really liked it, and I liked that there is a outlook that it's not the bleakness. So there is like the savior, even though I think in the Christian church and the Protestant church it's not as crass as in the Catholic Church, where it's like, oh, God is really angry with you.
Guilty by default. Yeah.
So it was lighter. I really enjoyed that. I enjoyed the whole youth activities that were offered. Participated in a lot of camps, summer camps, and stuff like that. Met a lot of people through that, so that was great. But ultimately, in my teenage years, I somehow felt there is such a lid on this. Like there is you can't really grow you can't grow out of that system, by asking new questions. I didn't feel that new questions were welcome, and I was always very inquisitive, up to the point that my teachers or kindergarten people called my mom and said, "She's always asking why. We don't know how to explain it to her anymore."
Why?
Yeah, it's like almost blaming my mom for raising me to always ask why. But I was just never really satisfied with something that didn't make sense to me. I really needed to feel that people were authentically living something, and I think I had a way of poking holes into these things.
So what was your first modality after you really decided, okay, so it's not the church, but there was a different moment when you realized, hey, there's more, and I'm gonna. Well, when was that moment?
Probably still while I was in church. But I didn't go. I wasn't like the rebel that then went its extreme hard left to going into spirituality. For me, it was more, I don't get the answers here that I want, so I'm just gonna take a step back, and stepped out of church, also because I needed to pay church tax, which I didn't feel like earning my own money. I was like, it doesn't make any sense. Here's an institution that I have to pay something to that I don't really believe in, so I stepped out of that, and then I just didn't even think so much about it anymore. But I noticed that I was looking at more things that made sense to me, like reading more about mindset and how you can help yourself out of a rut, because I was also a little bit prone to anxiety. So having like this stable mindset was really important for me, and I think through that, ultimately, in my mid-20s, I started reading more books on energy, and all of a sudden, what you can do for yourself in the whole mindset training thing, together with energy, those two things came together and really made sense for me. That I was like, oh yeah, great, awesome. And from that moment on, whatever I dipped my toe into just broadened the bigger picture for me. It was all very complementary, which I really loved. So I could never really get stuck in one system. I could always see, again, like with the church, you reach a certain point where you ask too many questions that the people around you in that system can't answer you. And then you just sort of continue your journey. And
go to the next thing.
Yeah, so I think in my mid-20s, probably I started reading a lot. Then, going to classes, meditation classes, going to spiritual groups and all of that stuff. But then I do think that I got very attached to the spiritual entitlement belief system of, now I've discovered that it's all spirituality.
Right.
And everybody is living in this spiritual system, but they don't know it. So it was almost like this, again, comparison.
Yeah. I'm awake, and here's the rest of the world is still sleeping.
Yeah. Yeah, whereas now, having stepped out of spirituality, it wasn't like a decision, I don't want to be spiritual anymore. I just understood that spirituality, as we use it as human beings, is also just a stepping stone. So many things are now in my natural understanding that I don't need to hold it as a belief system anymore. It's here, and I can feel it.
It's we often say this to each other, but it's a way of being instead of doing, and the doing is usually attached to a lot of modalities and systems and formulas, and the being is just being it, it's living it.
Yeah, and I think now opening up to what the world is going through, the search for something that makes sense, the search for purpose, the search for meaning, we can see that call gets louder and louder, and I think that's a beautiful movement, although it is very distracting to see the mental imbalances that pop up on that search.
Yeah.
But that is a by-effect of the evolution, I think.
Yeah,
in consciousness.
I think also because I think you said it earlier, but there is a very large group of people now in the world that are making a shift, and leave in the middle how big the shift is, but they're making a shift. Everybody knows what mindfulness is. Everybody knows what yoga is. Everybody knows about meditation. So I think there's a huge group in mass consciousness now that are looking around them, especially after COVID, going, hey, there has to be more, and how can we find this? And it's not frowned upon, but of course this enormous group is now starting their search. And I remember in the beginning of my journey also the mental imbalance was very big. I was depressed. I was very, there was a lot of anxiety. I didn't know if I was doing it right. I wanted to do it quickly, and of course when you try to do it quickly it goes slower. So there was a lot of turmoil, and a lot of old systems, especially survival, and where the fear came from in me, that I projected onto bad upbringing and this and that. But ultimately it's something in me that has decided it's dangerous out there, etc., etc. So deconstructing those old belief systems, that took me years. It took me a long time, and a lot of mental anguish. I wouldn't say I was super imbalanced, but just depressed. It just didn't go the way I wanted to go, and I also didn't make the big changes I wanted to make. So it's kind of always in the middle of everything.
And it's interesting to look at, because in the beginning, when you're on this journey of self-discovery, you notice certain patterns that don't serve you, so you actually do work on them.
Yeah.
You deconstruct them, and then you integrate it and you move along on your journey, and many years later you find like, oh, I am that now, right?
Yeah.
So is it actually important to deconstruct things, or is the integration itself the healing?
I believe the latter, but it took me so long to get to that part of the journey, because I believe it was deconstructing, digging, going into the past, understanding it, much like I think traditional psychotherapy works. So you go deep within to find the source, and then you change the source. And I'm not a medical or a doctor or psychologist, but I found it was helpful to some extent, but then the act of constantly digging if there's something wrong, or constantly trying to fix something, or and there's another word that's used a lot in spirituality, is cleaning, like to clean yourself. There's something wrong with you, and the very act of cleaning or digging deep and figuring out what was going on actually made it worse, because it almost like put the attention on something I didn't want to experience anymore, but was still there. And the more attention I give it, and I think that's a universal rule, if you give something attention, you'll get this similar feedback. But it was only until a couple of years ago where I really saw the connection between not digging, but feeling, and acknowledging certain feelings that come up, anxiety, anger, blah, blah, blah. So not shunning them away, just look at them and feel them, but then not go deeper, especially go, okay, I'm very angry. And the moment I don't put the agenda of having to figure it out, I'm very okay letting that emotion be there, so I'm not fighting it, and therefore it loosens up in such a way that the answers are coming in. But now I don't have to dig. So basically, I might be angry for a couple of weeks, maybe every day, as I'm in the process of feeling this. And sometimes I don't want to feel it, so I have to, find a space. Like walk in nature was something that really helped me. Endless walks in nature, because I could, my body was occupied enough to do something, walking, and whatever feeling I had, I would just like let rush through me, like literally go through me. And after a while, it really changed. The answers came in, but not because I was, blaming it on my parents or a bully on school or God knows what, but acknowledging it's my emotions. And if I decide to feel them, I can change them, but not by digging, but just by accepting and feeling. And then all of a sudden, you felt more space. There was more room. Answers came back that I wasn't even looking for. So I feel it's the whole fight with trying to fix something that actually makes it almost makes it stuck more. At least in my experience.
But I do believe that in the beginning of the journey, you need some kind of entertainment to get you, to snap you out of what doesn't work for you anymore. Yeah. To snap you out of, it's like everybody just does it that way, and I really don't understand why. Nobody's questioning. So self-reflection is the first thing. Then you notice, okay, this really isn't for me. So you use the mind, which has the strongest focus in this reality, to help you make that shift.
Yeah.
And at some point, the mind now needs to relearn what it's here for.
Yeah. Yeah.
So just getting me through my everyday life experiences and being able to learn stuff and observe and process information. But ultimately, that integration part, then having gone through the journey, you become more you become more beingness. The mind has a completely different role.
And to be honest, there's still moments, and we talk about this constantly, there's still moments where the mind, it really doesn't get it. So there's a different modality that we both use, and we talked a lot about it, calling it intuition, calling it Nost, calling it a knowingness. But the mind, it's not that the mind all of a sudden understands it better than a year ago. It understands it enough to know it works. It has enough reference of it now. But if you ask the mind, it just gets really confused. It's almost a stepping out of the way thing. Like, I don't know how this works, but I'll be in the corner if you need me. And that's, I think, the big difference is, because before I tried to understand this whole awakening process mentally. I'm very analytical. Yeah. So it just went in loops. I just got more stuck and I got just more frustrated. And because my mind was trying to understand the concept that's much bigger than the mind. It's much more about beingness, about knowingness, about
feeling. And that's just also not how any of us were raised. That your intuition actually has a place in this life and in society and even in your family, And
that's bizarre, isn't it?
Waking up in the morning and just saying, okay, so I'm having a complete off day. I can't go to school today or whatever. That even wasn't an option. You had to come up with lies and shit, So.
Yeah, but it's funny because even though schools are starting to talk about mental health and self-care routines and maintenance and that sort of stuff, but it's still, I'm still amazed by how little in mass consciousness or education is taught. This should be the first lesson when you I think here in Holland you go to school at 5. That should literally be the first class. Social skills and the difference between the mind and the heart, or the feeling and the thinking. And it's still, spirituality is more common, but that principle is still, like a lonely 5%, or not even that, taught in schools.
What would the motivation be to change a running system?
If the system is broken, but it is.
Yeah, but it takes a long time of trying to fix it here and there, like trying to...
Which is it's kind of the same analogy as I just said about the mind.
Mm-hmm.
You try to fix it from within and looking at details that just make it worse, basically, instead of zooming out and go, hey, what do we need to change on a holistic level, like on a higher level?
And that's why I think it's so important to make the connection that what we're experiencing now in the world is exactly the same thing that we went through in our own awakening.
Yeah.
And the microcosm works in the same way as the macrocosmos.
Yeah.
That it sort of doesn't work anymore. You try to fix it. Then at some point when, things just blow up big enough, then you go, okay, we need to change a few things. But then you also just come with small changes, right? Like I know on my own journey, a little bit here, a little bit of there. because the other things I didn't want to go near.
And that is a dynamic, like for anybody who's going into their awakening journey. That is a dynamic that I've had myself. I hear you talk about it, and all the people I ever speak to that are on this journey or have been talk about the same thing, about that particular dynamic.
Yeah,
I find it so interesting. Yeah.
So really now being where we are, still constantly exploring and reflecting on the beingness, and I think that journey will never stop. I'll keep running into patterns. I'll keep creating new patterns and then run into how they don't work for me anymore. I think that will just keep going. But now I know the system so well that I can lean into the change rather than be afraid of it and hold it off. But now that we know all of, that it is about becoming the beingness, we know where this world is headed.
Yeah.
On a collective
well,
level.
and I, we're in a lucky position that we see each other do it, but we have a lot of people around us that are doing this same thing too. So there's a lot of feedback and things to look at. And although even us don't do things the same way, but it's really nice to have a lot of people to look at and to compare notes with.
So you can accommodate it.
Yeah.
And again, I think we've talked about several ways how we facilitate ourselves and what's become important or non-negotiable.
Yeah.
Living with other people, interacting with other people, there'll always have to be boundaries, clear communication, alone time, taking yourself out of it, and then also changing the groups that you hang out with if they deplete you, if you just feel like doesn't feel compatible anymore.
Yeah, we said it before also, like it's a very simple trick. It's a very simple observation. Does this person or interaction give me energy, or does it take it away? And without blaming the other party, because that's usually what happens, is but no, that person is toxic, or that situation. Now keep it to yourself, but it's like, I just choose a different experience.
Yeah.
But, and here, exactly. That's the theory. And then the practice is the opposite, is that, I think humans intrinsically, and I'm looking at myself for the example here, I love to know more about this journey, about myself, but I never dare to make big changes. I pretended I make big changes. And, every time I did a course or something, I was like, oh my God, this is amazing, it's changed my life. And then, a week later, I would forget everything. And ultimately, humans are not built for change. There's very few humans that do well in the face of, a lot of change. And even a lot of people on the spiritual path that I consider to be far along, every single one of them is doing the same thing. It's just like they're very far along, but they're holding on to the last bits of investment, last bits of things that keep them safe, or they think that keep them safe, and nobody's really taking the super big leaps, like just go fuck it all, let's jump.
I don't think we can.
No. I think it'd blow up your human counterpart.
Yeah, because you need to take it along. And I think for me personally, on my journey, you got to do what you're doing until you know what you're doing.
Yeah.
And then you've got to overdo it for a long time before you can actually make a change. And all of those coping mechanisms that we have, or patterns that we have developed over the years, and when you are believing in different lifetimes, you take all of that with you. Mm-hmm. That needs to come down. You really need to be done with it in a way that it is a long-lasting change that you can make. Because I think the patterning is the thing that keeps repeating and that keeps you interacting with the same kind of people. The amount of experience comes to a point where it just blows up for you, but you attract what you send out.
Yeah.
So there's also energetic dynamics within all of this when you're on that journey. You can't just say, well, I'm just gonna change it. how many people move all over the globe just to find themselves in the same situation again?
To take yourself with you.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, I mean, we aptly titled this podcast The Rude Rebel's Handbook of Awakening. So, you know, if we get questions or if we get listeners that are on this, you know, on the beginning of their path and just had their awakening or their epiphany, or even running into, you know, the boundaries or the ceilings of the modalities that they're now investigating, what would be a nice toolkit for them to have? Like a couple of simple. We talked a lot about the dynamics of our own journey, but what could be the summary of it?
Wine, chocolate, sleep, coffee.
She's actually not entirely lying.
It is so individual. I think really looking honestly at what you're still entertaining, you know, like what are you still suffering through? What are you still gaining out of it? So it comes back to something very unspiritual, I think.
Mm-hmm.
From where I stand now, also as a coach, I would also always just turn the mirror around and say, okay, so you've created this somehow, you're in the situation, now look at what steps can you take to slowly create a new pattern that helps you. It's like creating a new muscle memory, but allowing the old muscle to still be there, you know, switching systems. A lot of talking about it with friends, I think.
Yeah.
Find yourselves people that you can hold accountable, that you can chat with, that give you honest feedback.
Yeah, I found that especially useful, not to feel alone, because I think even in my friend circle, I was one of the only ones. So I talked to some of them, but not really. And then when I started doing those spiritual courses, then I met a lot of other people. And then some of them were really like somebody I could talk to.
And it's a great thing.
That really worked.
Nowadays that we have all of these things like podcasts that you guys can listen to, and it might help you, or you have your things that you follow on social media or whatever that are really helpful for you. I think there's so much information out there, which is awesome. And I love being able to, you know, have all of that at a click away kind of thing.
At your fingertips,
But the thing is that also it doesn't really compete with having actual people to talk to. No. So because it's very one-sided, right? You consume, but you don't actually get to be in the conversation. So I think that's why it's so important to also bring on a few guests in our podcast.
Yeah.
Sooner or later, we will have some people just to also get some new impulses for us. And by the way, thank you so much if you've written into us. The next episode, we will probably commit to really reading through some of them, some comments that we got. Thank you so much. This is really helpful for us to know what you want us to talk about. And
in a way, it's the same thing that we just talked about. It's engaging with other people about this subject. And it's not about who knows more than the other, because it's so individual anyway at this point in the game. But like we really like the interaction and to see what's out there, what's living under the people listening to this. Yeah, and I think through that you can also have a bit of a room temperature on where everything is headed, because I do believe that the future is very bright. Again, Sandra is a hopeful romantic. I see that the changes that we are making as a society, the things that we are pointing towards, saying like that can't go on anymore, there's a certain movement in there that will bring results, and I do feel that that's a very positive outlook. It seems to be quite irreversible. Yeah, it's like it's just going. So it's like it's almost like at some point it becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy. Yeah, and I think just to stick to the little list that we talked about for people as a guidance. So talking to others. finding, I feel like just trying out different things. Don't be afraid to try meditation.
Put yourself out of the comfort zone. Yeah.
Indigenous sweat lodges, ecstatic dance, whatever.
But that's all
whatever,
spiritual stuff, right? But there's also so many other things that you
anything,
can try out.
anything,
Like
you know.
even learning a new language. Just I think creating a new reality or everyday
And
experience.
I think something that really helped me is I moved to London. So I worked in London for 2 years, first in Scotland and then in London. And the change of scenery also really got me out of my habits. It was. I think we all agree that you can move all you want, but you bring yourself with you.
Mm-hmm.
But having to deal with a different culture really also made me sort of appreciate a different perspective that was not set in my own ways. That it's not just Holland, not just Amsterdam, because it's a bit of a bubble in its own.
Mm-hmm.
So changing it up.
Changing the bubble.
Yeah, every once in a while, start doing something. I started learning how to dive. I started learning how to mountain climb and that sort of stuff. And it was really good to get me out of the everyday grind, doing something completely different.
Yeah. And I think the world is becoming so small that nowadays there's nothing that doesn't exist.
No.
You can, and that might also be a little bit the overwhelm that you don't even know where to begin looking. But then just know that you will always come across a hint, somebody say something or introduce you to something. Just sort of pay attention to the things that come on your path.
Yeah. It's funny because I was about to say exactly the same thing. So I was like, pay attention to the feedback of basically your own energy or your own reflection, but pay attention what comes back. A certain individual, a certain job, a certain feedback, or even something that you haven't even thought of. Like there's a lot of stories of people that just got handed a book from a friend. Oh, you should really read this, and then that would propel them into becoming a healer or an astrologer, or the other way around. It propelled them in learning everything about metaphysics and that sort of stuff. So it doesn't. I agree. It kind of has nothing to do with spirituality in the end.
No, it doesn't.
It's feeling. It's almost that same intuition feeling. Hey, what fits me? So when I hear about this, I get this, this feeling of enthusiasm and inspiration.
Mm-hmm.
And when it's something else that a lot of people say, oh, you should be doing that, but I don't get that feeling, then I don't care how many people are doing this kind of stuff. It's not for me because I don't get the feeling with it. So in the end, it's just, you basically just trust your feeling. Search your feelings, Luke.
And to know that there is a part that is guiding this whole thing, like whatever you believe in, like that could be God, that could be the angels, that could just be nature, that could be Mother Earth, that could be your soul, whatever, your own light. And that's my experience, that no matter how well prepared I thought I was for something, usually life happens while you're busy making other plans.
Yeah.
And those are the things to pay attention to, I think, to see the synchronicities that come up.
Yeah.
So it's not just, things that I get inspired by, or say, ooh, that feels really good. But also in general, how life just flows better. There's just this meandering.
And just playing advocate of the devil, because I've done this a lot myself too. Because I kind of knew this very early on. But then when big changes were happening, or basically I would get the feedback and, I paid attention. I was like, oh, this is big. This is a big shift. My initial reaction was be safe and keep it the same.
Mm-hmm.
So pretend I'm doing a lot of spiritual work. But basically my life was exactly the same. I was doing exactly the same things. I was communicating exactly the same way. It's almost like to keep the status quo intact. How do you break out of that? Because I was even aware of it, I still did it.
Yeah, and then you throw in but I ordered myself a parking spot from the universe kind of thing,
dear
right?
Angel,
So
dear parking angels.
All of those platitudes and excuses, right?
Yeah. Yeah, and the only time I really pushed through was when I just had enough. Like when communication or certain people got so shitty, and in the end, I can't really blame anybody, because it was always, when I look back on those things, it was always me not communicating properly or not making a choice. Basically, stay in the situation out of an idea of, well, you should be doing this, or you don't deserve it, or you're afraid to do it by yourself. I think everybody has different reasons for it. But then just staying in the situation, complaining all day long about it, but not doing anything about it. Until it got so shitty that you go, okay, well, it's more painful staying in the situation than going through the fear of doing something about it, and then have it happen what you fear will happen, which usually is not what happens. But that's the whole reason you don't change it, because you think, oh shit.
And because you still think you're in charge. That's for me, it's almost like a cosmic joke now. One that, the whole universe sometimes laughs about me, not with me, but about me. And those are the frustrating moments when you feel you have no agency in it. And I used to hate it so much, because I am very committed on my journey of self-discovery. And when then somebody says, don't take life so seriously. I'm just trying to understand like the fabric of life and how it works. And now you tell me to not take it so seriously. That is something, looking back now, I go, the amount of stuff that my mind could not have come up with that happened on this journey, that made me to who I am now, that also gave me a new trust mode that I couldn't have never developed by myself. And that works for everybody. It's not just for the few elitists that are very far along on their journey. It's like that works for everybody, no matter how aware they are.
But you have to you have to be able to let it go, to hold it lightly,
and pay attention. And then just have some fun.
Yeah. But that's exactly it. Of course, I don't try to look back too much, because again, it's the whole digging thing, and it's sort of pointless looking in the past, unless something comes up and like, oh, that happened because of that reason. Mm-hmm. But then I'm not looking for it; it just plops into my head. But that was one of the things, looking back, I got like, Jesus Christ, I took it so seriously. Mm-hmm. And I did have fun, because I also have a lot of nice people around me, but I took it so seriously.
It's the mind.
Oy, oy, oy. Yeah. And that usually when a situation was fun or light, or I would make it serious. I would make it heavy. And there was no reason to make it heavy.
No, I think to take, and that's the funny thing, to take yourself serious, you need to make it serious.
Yeah, until you don't.
And especially spirituality, because if you say this to somebody who's not spiritual at all, they will just laugh at you. So then, the spiritual society, community, groups, whatever, they become really serious about it, because, you have to take me seriously.
Yeah, that's usually also a good sign that there's an agenda running.
Can you laugh about yourself, right? Can you make fun of it? Like, for example, like today, I'm completely out of it. Like, still somehow makes sense, I think.
You said it well.
But
especially when the camera is running.
I just can't keep that game up for myself anymore, that pretend, that I've got my shit in order when I don't. When almost nothing in my head makes sense, and then you just go, okay, well, it's one of those days today.
Yeah. And don't make a story out of it. Just do what you need to do, like this podcast.
What you want to do as well, because I love this, you know.
Yeah.
It has very little to do with having to do this.
No, and I think in the past, I suffered a lot from, today, the energy's really high, I can't do anything. And I would just sit on the couch and be fucking miserable. And at the end of the day, okay, I've taken the time for myself. But at the end of the day, I'm much more miserable than I started, instead of going like, okay, this is a shitty day, I'm not going to fight it, I hate it, let's do something. Just to get out of my head.
The whole sentence started in a funny way. You said, in the past I've suffered a lot on this journey. The human existence is about suffering, unawareness or unaware suffering, where you replace the one suffering with another suffering. So now all of a sudden you've got this great tool at your hand called spirituality or self-improvement, self-development, whatever. And to get out of your old life that didn't serve you anymore. And what do? You go right into the next suffering, the energies are so strong.
And I think nowadays because I still do it, I still sometimes try and trick myself. But what really helps is that I had so much experience doing the same old shit over and over and over and over, and it really I'm the one that's the most bored with it at the moment. And there is a certain expansion in awareness. I sense things much better now, but including my own patterns.
Mm-hmm.
So even though I might then attempt to sell it to myself in a different way, and I'm good at telling stories, so I can also tell good stories to myself. Then I know
endless entertainment.
I just know, but dude, this is the same old story. You just put a fresh painted coat around it, and this is leading you exactly. And if you choose that out of freedom, it's okay to choose it. I'm not going to stop you. But this is not what you want, and you try. So why? And the only thing you have to do is be aware of it, and then make a decision of, okay, let me try something else. And usually for me, it entails going through a certain emotion that I didn't want to feel. And hence, that's the whole reason I'm trying to distract myself. And then I sit down for usually very short, and I do allow that emotion to come through. Or sometimes I need an entire day when I feel like yesterday I felt really, really shitty. And then at the end of the day, it's done. And so that was the one that I was, running away from for months and months and sometimes years. And all it takes is sometimes an hour of breathing or a day, maybe a weekend. It is amazing. And it's not even that bad. But in my mind, I've made such a big fuss about it.
You sort of, you try to circumvent it, you dance around it, you postpone it, you don't want to look at it. And confronting it sometimes also just means like, I'm going to observe you from the outside, which means now you're not hidden anymore.
Yeah.
And most of the time I'm finding with whatever aspects are still running amok within me, that's enough. That they need to be observed.
Yeah.
Right? And some of them maybe want to have a resolution or,
Yeah, and preferably without judgment. But even if you have judgment, it still works.
But I think, what you just said before, the mind inherently just wants to go back to sleep.
Yeah.
It does not like this journey at all.
No, still doesn't.
So, no, it will never like this journey, but it will begin to maybe understand the journey a little bit.
Yeah.
And, help you reflect on it, but you will still have to make those uncomfortable choices to say, I'm not going to suffer today. I'm going to just choose something that feels like something different.
What creates a movement, any movement, any direction, doesn't really matter.
And I think that's where a lot of my suffering came from. When I'm depressed, when I'm anxious, when I'm not quite myself, I'm very passive. And then there's this stasis I can't move out of. And then, in that mode, the mind just loops back in on itself. So what's really important for me, and I know for you too, but I think out of a different motivation, for me, it's also movement, physical movement, to just also put my foot down and say, shut the fuck up, I've really had it. This is changing now. So agency over your own moods.
Yeah.
I'm not a victim of it, and it's not part of my identity anymore.
But again, it had to come to the absolute limit of...
Yeah, which is funny in itself, really, if you look at it. So if you ever need any entertainment, the excuses we come up with, Jesus Christ.
Especially from a spiritual angle. I think even more clever ones than if you're coming from the psychology side of things. But it's funny, right?
Yeah. I was driving yesterday with my son, and he's 21. And we were chatting in the car, and we were talking about, because he's not on the spiritual journey at all. Like for him, that's woo-woo. And his mom is a little bit goo-goo. Woo-woo, goo-goo. Might be a good episode. But we were talking about becoming aware of the games you're still playing with yourself, because that is universal. That is not, that's not a spiritual thing. So he can go along with that. And that's actually what we share. And then he asked something. Let me try to get back what he asked. Something about like why we haven't done something sooner. And then I said, yeah, but I also had other stuff going on. And then he's like, and here's another excuse. And I had to laugh out loud because it's so funny. We just talked about all of the excuses we come up with.
Yeah.
And then we talk about something normal in this, life, whatever needs to be done. And he says, he really put that light back on me. It's like, oh shit, you're right, yeah.
So then you send him to his room.
No,
for his insolence.
Send him to Mongolia to start working in mines or something. I don't know.
The salt mines of Kamchatka.
But it's that thing like
and that's also paying attention, right?
Pay attention, and that could be almost like a new hobby. That if it's actually quite fun to observe the mind, and it's like when I observe the mind, I am not the mind. I'm observing the mind.
Yeah, that's a good one.
Yeah.
Yeah, and we discussed in a couple of podcasts ago where it's pay attention. It's also when you made a big choice, and not from the mind, but from something that makes you feel excited, right? And you leave the details out of it, and you leave the steps or the obstacles. You just go, oh, that could be great. That's a great new movement. But I don't have to worry how to get there, what step 10 is, when I have to get when it feels expansive, and you make a choice, then the feedback comes through your own wisdom, through feedback through others, and that's where you pay attention. That even the no's that come back, or a situation that was kind of shitty, but it's comfortable because you were used to it. All of a sudden you get fired from a job. So you make that choice, and a day later your boss calls and you can go. Or your relationship ends, and it seems like a catastrophe. I'm not creating well. I've done this wrong. You see, it's a lot of no's, and I was so passionate about this. No, that's actually the good feedback, because it's changing to make room for that hard choice that you made.
Lee Harris has a great phrase. He says, that's just great information. So when something like that happens, when you get fired from your job, or somebody leaves you, that's great information. So stop judging it as bad. Oh, that's great information. Okay. And then go look at the choice that you made, and that's probably a consequence that's happening because you say, I really want this part of my life to change. In
order to get to this choice, there are certain obstacles in the way that will automatically, if you allow them to, melt away because they don't fit with your initial choice. So something has to give. I found that fascinating, how a lot of those things that seem completely negative. And then what I used to do is, you see, it's not working. So almost revoke the initial choice, even though it made me really happy. Then try to solve the no, which is actually the yes of the original choice, right? And then get so confused and hung up in trying to shift something that was actually going perfectly well, that I neither solved it nor get to the original choice. So I was sort of like stuck.
No, but you also interfered.
Yeah, exactly.
And I think that takes, again, a very honest look at yourself, which is not something that comes natural to us.
Yeah, no, that's true. Well, as you can hear, a big crane just arrived, and they're now drilling. So it's we're stirring some energies. So I think this would be a good point to wrap up the show.
Yeah. Again, thank you so much for writing in, commenting, your likes, and maybe even your reviews, and maybe share it with a friend or a foe or a hoe. Whoever you want to share it with.
That's very distinctive.
Next episode, next Friday, we will read a few of those comments, read a few of those emails. You can write to us at podcast@rude-rebels.com. And Jonathan, what's your parting words?
May the force be with you, always.
I think it's the 4th of July will come up soon. So
Yeah.
Exactly.
So get your lightsabers out.
Yeah. Take care, everybody.
Have a good weekend.
Bye.
Ciao.